Good morning, everyone. My name is Heather Kinsey, and I'm joining you today from the Strive Group. It is Wednesday, and today's topic is leading by encouraging and supporting employee self-direction. Our guest today is Jonathan King. If you're new to our webinars and you're watching us live, you'll see that there is a chat function on the right-hand side of your screen. Feel free to utilize that chat function if you have any questions for Jonathan. I'm your moderator for today, and so I will pop back in both in video and in audio to alert Jonathan that you have a question. If it gets towards the end of our time here today, so closing in on the 11 o'clock hour, please make sure that you have your email address typed into that chat pod, because we might not get to you online, but I'd like Jonathan to be able to contact you directly. So without further ado, I'll try to get the housekeeping done with. Today's session obviously is with Jonathan King. Tomorrow's is with Karen Kirk with Synergistic Solutions. She'll be talking about working effectively at home. And then we'll wrap up the week with an employee benefits update from our friends over at Risk Consulting. If you have any ideas or any concerns, you can email them to me at info@thestrivegroup.com. And again, if you're watching us live, please interact with us via the chat pod. So Jonathan, take it away.
Well, thank you, Heather, and welcome everyone to our seminar this morning. It may be good afternoon or even good evening, depending on where you are watching this webinar from, or if you're watching on replay. I hope everyone's having a great day. My name is Jonathan King. I'm the founder of Halcyon Consulting, located in Anchorage, Alaska, and a very proud Strive Group affiliate. Today, we're going to be talking about really the role of empowering your employees and why it's so critical here during this COVID-19 period, where we're all feeling disruption, right? And as you can see, I am calling in this morning from my house with my steel fish behind me up on the wall. Heather and I were having a nice conversation before we started about the fish. But really today, we're going to be focusing in on why empowered employees are so important. And I think one of the things that we have to remember as leaders is that our job is really to lead. I mean, frequently we have people that climb up the leadership ladder from being a doer to being a leader, and they forget, right? They're used to doing the doing, and they forget sometimes about the leading. And the primary thing about being a leader is to really get the most out of your employees. And if you have empowered employees, that turns into reduced leadership burden, which means that you personally are doing less, your team is getting more done. So we're going to talk today really about three really important ways that we can enable that empowerment within our employees, reduce our own leadership burden, and get more done. So first of all, the very first thing we're going to talk about here as we go through this, we're going to talk about creating clarity. We're going to talk about creating clarity both for ourselves and when we need employees to do something. And we're going to talk about creating clarity for our employees, including when they need something from us, right? So you're hearing there that there's two really important things about clarity. We're clear, they're clear, we're clear about the same things. And then two different situations, when they need something from us and when we need something from them. We're going to talk about the importance of giving authority, right? Which is empowering people to do what we need them to do. And how often have you in your past history been tasked with doing something, but you left not knowing if you actually had the authority to take the steps that were needed in order for you to get what you were told to do done, right? That is an absolute trap for employees. It takes them longer to get things done. They get frustrated. And then as leaders, we get frustrated and we wonder, why didn't this happen, right? So we need to talk about giving authority. Lastly, we need to talk about feeding individuals psychological safety, which allows them to be receptive to both the clarity and the authority, and is really a key in terms of getting our employees and all of us to settle down, particularly in this moment where our lives are being disrupted and there's a lot of uncertainty out there. We're going to talk about feeding that psychological safety. So you will hear me pause at the end of each of these slides, and I will ask Heather if there's any questions. No questions at the moment, so we'll just keep on rolling. So let's talk about creating clarity. Heather's there. Heather, did you have a question?
There is a question. It is Jonathan going to explain what psychological safety is later, or can he do it now?
Jonathan can explain what psychological safety is right now, but we'll also talk about it later. Psychological safety is really the concept that you can bring your whole self to work, or any aspect of your life without fear of ridicule, retribution, belittling. Really, it's that you can bring everything, every gift that you have to the table, have those discussions that need to be had, and you don't have to worry about your place within the group, the reaction of the group, and really, sometimes some of the negative behaviors that we see that deter people from bringing their best self, right, at work. So if you're psychologically safe, you can bring all of your gifts to the table without fear that bringing those gifts to the table is going to negatively impact you as a person. Right? That is psychological safety. So let's talk about creating clarity when you as the leader need something done, right? So this is absolutely critical. This is a situation where you as the leader need to hand off a task or to delegate something to someone. And the very first thing we need to do is know what you want, right? And so we would be surprised that many people, when they need to get something done, they don't express it in terms that truly and clearly express what it is that they need done and what it is that is important about that task that you need done. Now, I can tell somebody, please paint my house green, but if I have expectations around what shade of green that is, then I need to create that clarity both first for myself and then for them, right? Otherwise, I might come back and find it's a shade of green that I'm really not looking for, right? And I think a lot of us have handed off tasks like that where we say, go do X, and we get a version of X that isn't quite what we're looking for. So we need to be clear about that for ourselves in the very first thing. Secondly, we need to talk about what is called the platinum rule of communications. And the platinum rule of communications is communicate unto others in a manner at which they can understand what you're saying. So as a leader and as individuals, we all have default communication styles. It is not our followers' jobs to adapt to our communication styles. It is our job to adapt our communication style to our followers. So you'll have some people that are visual. You will have some people that are readers. You will have some people that are auditory, right? You need to be able to communicate with individuals and express what you want in a way that those individuals can understand. Now, the very first question that is on many people's minds is about the why, right? Like, how is this going to affect me? And you've seen this if you've ever been in a conference room where a leader stands up and they say, we're going to do this, and this is where we're going, and here's what's going to happen. And you can see the fear kind of spread in the room, the anxiety, because they're like, oh, what does this mean for me? What's my role in it? Why am I being involved? So we have to address this why, because it reinforces the purpose and it gives us that opportunity to connect people to the mission and vision and values of the company. So when we're handing off that assignment, we need to say, this is why this is important. This is how it helps us move the ball down the field and advance ourselves when it comes to the current mission of the company. Lastly, a little tip is get it repeated back to you. Okay, so you've given out your instructions, and really a great way to phrase this is to say, well, Jonathan, I've explained to you what I'm looking for, and so that I know that I've expressed myself correctly and that it's clear what we've agreed upon. Can you just repeat back to me what you heard and what the action items are? Right? So it's really a moment of curiosity where you're having this self-check upon yourself, and it gives you that opportunity. Heather has popped in and has another great question for us. What do you have, Heather?
I do have a question, but before I jump into the question, I just wanted to say kudos to you, Jonathan, for talking about the golden rule of communicating, and then even more specifically to make sure that as leaders or as any type of presenter or communicator, that we're very cognizant of the fact that people don't gather and organize information necessarily in the way that we do. So if they're audio learners or visual learners or even kinesthetic learners, if we don't appreciate that they need something to organize information correctly, then we're never going to understand why they don't get it. Right. So I appreciate that as a trainer and instructor for my entire career. I love it when I hear experts like you sort of validate what I've been doing, for as long, or at least what I've tried to do for as long as I've tried to do it. But that's neither here nor there. The question is, Jonathan, what about if you don't know the why, or if the why is something scary or threatening? Should you leave it out?
That is a great question. I'm going to actually say that I'm not sure that there's a perfectly right answer there. And I think it comes back down to the psychological safety, right? So when we get to psychological safety, we'll try and address that one. But I think that one of the things there is when you don't know the why, like you truly don't know, I think it's okay to say that and to say like, hey, this has come down from on top. I don't understand where this is fitting in fully, but I'm going to work on that and I'm going to bring it back to you. If it's something that's scary, I think we have to work with our team to make it less scary, or to say, acknowledge the fear, right? One of the key components to controlling our emotions is actually verbalizing and acknowledging it as opposed to ignoring it. So ignoring and actually suppressing that fear will actually increase the power of that fear. It also has distinct physiological reactions within our body, such as higher blood pressure, higher heart rate, general feeling of unease. But if we can acknowledge that and say, hey, this is the why, I know that it's scary. My job as a leader is to help protect you from that and to make it as less scary as possible, right? Is to help minimize that. But we acknowledge in this moment that this is something that is scary. Just acknowledging that it's scary will actually reduce fear. A little bit roundabout there, but I think that was helpful. Now let's talk about clarity when they need something. So now the situation is the individual has come to you, and we often get these interruptions as leaders where people will pop in. I work with some leaders who will say that they have frequent flyers who will come and visit at certain times of the day and will absorb some information or absorb some time. So let's talk about creating clarity when an individual that you're working with needs something. The very first question that I like to ask is, what's really on your mind, right? What is it that you hope to get out of this discussion, right? And then there's a great follow-on that is, and what else is on your mind? And the reason for that is that people will very rarely bring what's truly bothering them about a situation or what they truly need up on the first go around. You will have some that are direct enough to do that. Others will kind of dance around or beat around the bush. And what else after what's on your mind gets that list out. It gets that primary topic out, and it creates a list, a set of boundaries of kind of like what that conversation is going to be about. So then they describe to you what it is that's going on, what the situation is. And here's a great coaching question for those of you that are interested in building your coaching skills that you can build in there, is to ask, what's the real challenge here for you? And that takes the person out of storytelling mode. So here's what's on my mind. And it takes the problem and it focuses it in on themselves, and it starts to move them towards their role in solving the challenge, right? What's the real challenge here for you? Then once they've made that transition to start thinking about themselves and their role in what's going on, we can ask them, what do you want to do? Okay. So what is the action? What is it that you want out of this situation? And then we ask them, okay, what action do you want to take? So what do you want and what do you want to do? I apologize that what do you want to do is not on the slide, but we've moved them from the telling of the story, right? They come into the office, they're all excited, they've got a question, they've got a need, and it's about that story. They tell the story, we focus them towards themselves, and then we ask them, what is it that you want? What is the optimal solution? What is it the optimal outcome? And then what's your role in it? And then we ask this question, how can I help you? How can I help you do your role in moving down this? Now, this is a kind of a tricky question because you have to know your limits of how much you're going to want to be able to help. Heather is back on the board here. Heather, tell me what has popped up for our audience.
It's a dual question. So do with it what you can, what you may. But it is this or should this be a script? And about how long do these conversations last? And I know that your answer is probably it depends. But I think the first one is a really poignant question. Is it a script that you're suggesting we as leaders should be going through when our employees come to us?
Yeah, so I actually, these questions actually come from Michael Bungay Stanier's book, The Coaching Habit. And that's how I like to think about them. This is a habit. You can develop your own questions so it doesn't seem quite so script-like, but you can use these questions, and ideally, if you make it a habit, it'll just start to become a natural component of how you lead. And so a script if you need it, but really it's about making it a habit so that this just becomes a natural moment of curiosity, right? We're curious in the building, in the beginning, we're pivoting them and we're moving them towards being empowered on their own by thinking about their role in taking action and letting them know that you're supporting them in the end, right? How can I help you? Now, these questions or these conversations, they will vary in length. But if you use this technique, what you will find is that on average, those conversations are shorter and they're more effective because you're helping the employee create clarity about what it is that they need to do to move the ball down the field to get that success that we're looking for. So you're going to have to do the work to build a little bit of structure in, but it's going to pay off in shorter conversations, fewer conversations, because the employee now knows that instead of it just being open air time, that you're going to expect them to pivot and make some changes. And what you'll find is they'll start self-coaching, which means less questions for you, dear leader, and more time to work on the things that you need to work on. All right, let's talk about granting authority. Granting authority is really this question is, what am I authorized to do, right? And this is authority is part of clarity. What is it? How far is it that I'm allowed to go? What decisions am I empowered to make in getting us from point A to point B if I've been tasked with getting us to point B? If we can create clarity about what that accountability is and what authority that person has to create that work product, they're going to be able to do it better, right? And they're going to come with fewer questions. It's really a question of how far can I go? Now, once we've handed over that authority, we do need to make it clear of when do I need to return to my leader for consent, for clarification, or to provide information. And it's a little bit outside of this seminar, but two great tools that are out there for helping with the granting of authority is the RACI model, right, which is responsible, accountable, consent, and inform, RACI, go look that one up, and also having a product-based job description that defines the authorities of that role so that you're creating a baseline understanding of authority and everybody has that understanding of authority. So we really want to help create this form of clarity, not just in what needs to be done, but what the person is empowered to do to get the work product that's done. Heather, what do you have for us in this moment?
I don't have a question. It's just another observation, Jonathan, and I appreciate this, the information that you just provided on the slide, but I appreciate it because often when we delegate work, we fail to delegate the authority that comes along with that work, or the resources that come along with making sure that work gets done. And so if you get into a habit, as you had mentioned on a previous slide, right, create your own habits, create your own cadence, create your own scripting, then if you just don't forget to grant authority as well, and not just to the person. I would say it's not just to the person, that one employee that you're talking to, but make sure that the teammates or that other stakeholders, either upstream or downstream from the process, that they also understand that you've granted the authority to this person. Because other than that, it's just creating inefficiencies, right? So the more you can communicate, and I loved it what you said on the previous slide, think of it like an investment, right? So I may be heavy or front loading sometime now, but look at all the time that will come back to me later. And I think granting authority falls within that same philosophy. So I just wanted to appreciate that. There wasn't a question per se.
So that's, I mean, I think I'm right with you, Heather. You know, it really is about, we're creating clarity and not just what needs to be done and what the expectation is about outcoming work product, but we're really creating creating clarity around what you're empowered to do to get there, right? And that helps remove inefficiencies. It makes it easier for upstream and downstream, that if you've made that clear to people, it makes it really helpful. You're just removing a lot of inefficiencies. You're also removing a lot of frustration, friction, like all of the things that kind of go into our last topic, which is really about psychological safety. If you create that clarity, you're really creating a base to have great psychological safety, which is going to make people even more focused and more empowered.
Right. And so, and I'll let you go. I'll hop off, but I just wanted to, I mean, I totally echo that, that philosophy or that thought that you have, because for myself, not just now, but 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, ago, not from now, but ago, back in my younger days, I remembered how good it felt to be given authority. Even if that authority had some structure and some boundaries around it, I remember feeling quite empowered, that I was trusted. And that made me feel good, and it boosted my confidence. And I'm sure that you'll talk about that as a part of psychological safety. But I'm really digging that slide, but I will turn it back to you. So I'm off now.
Right. I mean, it's if you know where the box is, right, where the level is, you're going to take that authority and where you can go up to that line for most people. If you don't know where it is and you're scared about going over the line, then you're only going to perform to this level. And so making that clear is a real force multiplier for us. I want to talk about another force multiplier, and this is a force multiplier that is really kind of an up and coming area. It's an area that is firmly based in neuroscience, and that's about psychological safety. And I want to say psychological safety is absolutely key. There's a great TED Talk out there by a Harvard professor by the name of Sean Achor. He's a really young guy, and he talks about happiness at work. And we are about 30% smarter and more productive than when we are in a state of happiness than when we are in a state that is not unhappy, but also not happy. So happiness and safety is really key. And so how does psychological safety play into that? Well, about 75% of our older brain, the amygdala, the first part of our brain to develop, and a part of our brain that we happen to share with almost every vertebrate creature, is devoted to psychological safety and the safety of our environment. It is constantly scanning and asking the question, am I safe? And when the answer is no, that's when we trigger the fight or flight response, which involves, adrenaline surges and not, wondering what I should be doing. And actually, our decision-making ability when fight or flight is activated, our decision-making ability goes down, and it goes down substantially. So we want to keep people in a space where that part of the brain is settled and they're able to be okay. Now, another way that this is an up and coming area is that for those of you out there that are working with millennials, is that they expect a psychologically safe environment for good reason. They want to perform at their best. And that is one of the things that is driving cultural change in the workplace these days, is this millennial drive and younger generation drive for psychological safety. And for those of you out there that have an older workforce or are on the older end or more experienced end of work yourself, this means that cultural behaviors that were acceptable 10 or 20 or 30 years ago are no longer acceptable in the workplace. And that trend is going to continue. So you leader, okay, how do you know and how do you create psychological safety for your employees? That's the idea that they can bring their whole selves to the office. First of all, it comes down to knowing your employees. There's a psychological safety model out there that's been created by the Academy of Brain-Based Leadership. And each one of us leads in some way, has differing needs for safety with respect to security, autonomy, fairness, esteem, or trust. Okay. So if you have an employee that is a high security employee, slow change for that individual, right? Those are your slow changers. The autonomy folks, don't micromanage them. Tell them, I need to get to the top of that mountain over there. Let them find the way to that mountain. Give them the clarity. Here's your authority. Here's where we need to go. Stand out of the way. Your fairness folks, you're going to lean heavily into that conversation that we talked about creating clarity for them so that they feel like they've had their say. Okay. Your high esteem folks, these frequently are your high achievers. They are driven somewhat by status. We make sure that we praise in public. We definitely criticize in private, and we criticize in a way that they can receive. Your high trust folks, you emphasize belonging to the group. Okay, these are your team folks, like being on the team is really important to them. These are the people that are going to be wearing your corporate swag, even on sort of non-corporate cheerleading days, right? They want to belong to the team. So we should know for our teammates and our direct reports where they sit in that field, and we can tweak our conversations about clarity using these different groups. So I'm at the end of my official slides, but I want to ask Heather if there's any final questions before we try to hit that 28-minute mark that's so magical with these webinars.
I talk sometimes too much and we go, 31 minutes, 32 minutes. I don't have any questions from the audience right now, Jonathan, but I have a personal question specifically about psychological safety. Would you be willing, and I'm totally putting you on the spot, so, oh well, I'll bake you something good, but would you be willing to do a webinar specifically on psychological safety? I think that there's a lot more to unpack than just, 5 or 7 minutes dedicated in this short time frame can give this.
There's absolutely a lot to unpack here. This is its own webinar, it's its own training, and absolutely, I would love to talk about this with the in a webinar format and to get people's questions, because we have high and low need individuals in each of these areas. They each require their own kind of special sauce in terms of how we manage them, and giving those tips to individuals would be absolutely great, and helping to start build this culture of a more empowered and more psychologically safe culture that in the end is much more effective in its performance levels.
Right. And so that does make me think about just another question. So I always have Maslow in mind, right, when I'm talking about workforce engagement and fulfillment and productivity and performance. I call it Maslow matters, right? We have to take care of the lower things in his pyramid before we get to the higher things. Stuff. And but the specific question that I'm thinking about right now, while we have just a little bit of time left, is this is true. This psychological safety thing is always true. It was true 2 months ago. It was true 20 years ago. Right now, we are in really a time of disruption, and there's a lot of unknowns, right? I mean, almost every day we get something new to try to navigate through. Yeah. So just really quickly, what would be your advice to leaders to maybe ground them on the psychological safety aspect of them and their teams, even while we've got just a hornet's nest going around, buzzing around on any given day?
Yeah. So if you think about each of these 5 factors, right, that spell out safety, right? Each of them has a something that we could be doing in this COVID-19 moment, right? So for security, we need to be reinforcing with people like, hey, we're still going to be here when this is over, right? Like we're taking steps to make sure that we're still going to be here when this is over. For the autonomy folks, like, if they're productive and they're at home and they're working it, like kind of leave them be, like that, let them go. For the fairness folks, if you've got decisions that are coming down, like do it in a way maybe that you have a Zoom call where you let people ask questions and you let people process, right? Because the fairness folks, like the high fairness folks, they need that time to process. They need to make sure that they've been heard, that their peeps have been heard, right? The esteem folks, in the COVID environment, it's giving them an opportunity to shine, even though you're not all together. And with the trust folks, right, it's about bringing the team together, making sure that they know that the team is intact, that the tribe is intact. And so, like for the trust folks, you're virtual beer 30 on Friday, where you bring everybody together and remind them, hey, you're still part of X, Y, and Z company team. We're together. And, for Maslow's hierarchy, you're going to see right now a lot of people shifting a little bit more towards security, a little bit more towards trust, as they deal with all of this uncertainty. It's going to change their baseline a little bit, and we have to expect that. And it could be crazy. Like I've seen this within my coaching clients. Some of them have absolutely positively risen to the occasion of COVID-19. And you have other clients that this is just an overwhelming experience for them. And so we just have to know that you just don't know how people are going to react under fire until you're under fire, right? And we have to leave space for that.
Right. Well, thank you for that. And I look forward to another webinar. Let's get that on maybe towards the end of the month. I think we've got some openings in our programming. So if you're watching right now, check out our website then to see when Jonathan's popping back in specifically to talk about psychological safety. So we have gone a little bit over. I do apologize, fully own it, because I wanted to engage with Jonathan totally selfishly. But I'd ask if you're watching to tune in again. We offer these daily. We have a variety of topics that are both good for leaders and for workers alike. If you have any suggestions for topics and you'd like to see them pop up into our programming, please feel free to send those suggestions to info@thestrivegroup.com. If you have an idea of who could be our guest for that topic, feel free to name that person and I will reach out to him or her and ask if they'd come on board. If you don't have any ideas on who could do it, don't worry about it. I will find somebody. I'll reach out to my network. We'll find an expert. I'll convince them to join us online, just like Jonathan has done. And voila, you've got your webinar made specifically for you. I encourage everybody to strive for positivity and reach out to people, your neighbors, your loved ones, a friend you haven't talked to in a while, just to let them know that, they're on your mind and in your hearts and all of that. And so I will go ahead and log off, but I'll leave you here with a little bit of information about Jonathan. I got to tell you, I love this man. He's insightful. He's intelligent. He's funny. He's patient. He's forgiving. He's generous with his soul. So all of those things I couldn't fit on the slide, but I'll log off and Jonathan could say his goodbyes. And for the rest of you, have a good day, wash your hands, and until next time.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for that very kind send-off. I want to say thank you to everyone who is watching live and who may watch in the future. My name is Jonathan King. I'm the owner of Halcyon Consulting. And have a great day. And as Heather says, wash your hands and be safe out there. Take care.